that will be able to support you in your next career step. I'm joined today by two guest speakers, Mark Charman, the CEO of GOOSE Aviation, and Samantha Wilson, who's the commercial manager of GOOSE Aviation. They'll be introducing themselves a bit later, but I just want to give you a bit of a summary of how this session is going to work. So we're going to be online for about 45 minutes to 1 hour. To allow time at the end to do a bit of a Q&A session with you. So you'll see on the right hand side of your screen a box where you can ask questions of us. I'll be collating those throughout the session, so please do type away, and then I'll be tabling those questions with Samantha and Mark at the end of the session. If we can't get to all the questions, which is probably likely, don't worry, I'll be collating them all and then publishing the questions and the answers in newsletters that come out during the next coming days and weeks. So the session today, as I mentioned, we were joined by GOOSE Aviation. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us on the panel. They're going to give you an insight into their organisation, of course, and also the current jobs that are available in the sector. But what we also want to concentrate on and recognise is the way we interview is very much different while we're in semi-lockdown still at the moment. So we want to discuss how virtual interviews take place and tips and tips, how you can actually maximise your attendance of those virtual interviews. So to that end, I'm going to hand over to Mark, please.
Wendy, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'd just like to say a quick hello and welcome to this webinar this morning. Thank you to Wendy and BALPA for organising this. Obviously, incredibly tough times right now. And I think for all of you pilots out there, this is a really good indication of kind of finding out who your friends are. You know, they say that in tough times, you find out who your friends are. I think now is one of those tough times. And so thank you to Wendy and BALPA for your support with organising this. As Wendy said, please ask questions as we go through this today. There's a lot of us on the webinar, and so we'll do our best to get through as many of those questions that you have as possible. And Wendy will go through and pick out some of the big themes that come up. There'll be some big topics and big themes that come up in today's webinar, and Wendy will pick those out and ask Samantha and myself at the end of the webinar some of these questions. So I'm going to start off and tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about GOOSE for those of you who are not familiar with who we are. And I'm not going to spend too long on that. I'm going to go straight into really sharing with all of you my advice for kind of I guess, you know, how do you sort of manage your career in a crisis, and what are some of the things that you need to look at and pay extra attention to during these very difficult times. So we're going to look at things like CVs, we're going to look at some social media stuff, we're going to look at video interviews and how to be really good on video interviews, and also look at kind of some of our survival tips that we can share with you of how to kind of make it through this difficult period. At the end of that, I'm going to pass you over to Samantha Wilson. Sam is going to walk you through some of our current opportunities, in particular a big campaign that we're doing for a client at the moment that some of you will be interested in. And as I said, at the end, we'll go through a Q&A. So let me load up a presentation, see if my IT skills hold up. Let's have a look. Right, so managing your career in a crisis. Let's get stuck in. We've got quite a lot to cover. I'll try and keep it moving and keep it interesting. So first of all, who am I? Well, I think the first thing to say here is I'm a professional recruiter. So I've worked in recruitment for probably 26, 27 years now. Personally, I've placed over 1,000 people in my career to date. Whilst I'm the CEO of GOOSE and I'm the CEO of the group behind GOOSE, I'm still very much a recruiter. So I'm still very much hands-on, involved in placing mostly senior executives now in business, in aviation, in transportation, and so I'm still hands-on. I do a lot of public speaking at events. I do a lot of sessions like this, working with people on kind of careers and careers advice and recruitment and what's happening in the world of recruitment at any one time. And I guess that the phrase that we use to describe kind of what we do is we're global people specialists. So talking at events, listening to people, actively still recruiting, talking to airlines, talking to our recruitment partners, talking to HR departments in airlines. I've got a pretty good sort of view of that world and kind of what's important to airlines, what's important to candidates, what really matters. And kind of I'm going to bring some of those hints and tips and some of that advice to you guys out there today. So who are Goose? I think the first thing to say is we're kind of, we describe ourselves as innovators, not imitators. So we're trying to do things a little bit differently to some of the other recruitment businesses that are out there. And we've listened, and when we set up Goose, we listened to kind of the feedback from pilots about what they wanted from a recruitment partner. One of the big things that came up then, and it comes up time and time again, and I think in these tough times, we're hearing it even more, is that we're high touch, not just high tech. And so what does that mean really? Well, it simply means talking to people. And it simply means kind of picking up the phone, talking to people and taking the time to have that sort of human contact. And as I say, in this difficult period, that's probably more important than ever, that we are what we call high touch and that we're talking to our pilots, we're talking to our candidates more than ever and helping you during this period. We have big ambitions in this space. Our ambition is to be #1 in the world of pilot recruitment. We're on a great path towards that. It's fair to say that coronavirus didn't figure in January in this year's SWOT analysis and business planning for the year. It didn't come on the agenda that there would be a global pandemic, and it's a big speed bump for us as a business, and it's a huge speed bump for you guys in your careers. We're not pilots. I'm not a pilot. I know enough about flying to be dangerous. We're very much recruiters, but we're also very passionate about the aviation space, and we're very much emerged as an organisation that really is focused on this pilot recruitment piece and kind of immersing ourselves in that. So some of the airlines that we've been recruiting for, we recruit globally, so we're not a UK focused airline. We're not working solely with UK pilots. We're operating all over the world. You can see from some of the logos of the companies that we recruit for that we're pretty diverse in the types of airlines, the types of aircraft and the locations that we recruit for. So that's really a little bit about us, and I said I was going to keep it short because really I want the focus of this session to be about you, not about us and not about me. The focus of this session is about you and about giving you career advice and sharing with you hints and tips that will help you to secure a great job during this tough time, and certainly coming out of this to kind of get your career back on track. So what I would like to look at first of all is CVs. And so I think it's really important to say when it comes to writing a CV that actually there's kind of no right and there's no wrong way to write a CV. There are no set ways in which a CV must be produced. So there's no right, there's no wrong. I would say to you really that there are only opinions, okay? And so really when you're writing your CV, be thinking about this because there are some fundamentals that you want to get right. So most everyone has a view of what makes a great CV, and it's that kind of, what's the saying, love is in the eye of the beholder. You know, the reality is they are opinions, but there are some fundamentals that you've got to get right. And so I'm going to walk you through some of those fundamentals today. Okay, so when we talk about CVs, we talk about the 5 I's. So the objective of a CV, why do we produce a CV? Well, it's to introduce you as a candidate to a client. And really what you're trying to do is you're trying to impress that client. You're trying to impress that hiring company, and you've got to inform them about who you are. You've got to get them interested, but ultimately you're trying to get an interview. So these are the kind of the 5 I's, if you like, of a CV. And I want to walk you through some of those fundamentals. So first of all, some of the things that I get asked a lot about CVs. One of the first thing is, how long should my CV be? Well, the reality here is, again, there is no right or wrong answer. It is your CV and it is personal to you. So it really depends on how much you have to say. If you've got a lot to say and it's interesting, you're going to have a longer CV. If you were starting out in your career, and maybe this is your first job, you might not have so much to say. And so trying to pad it out and spread it over a number of pages is not really necessary. And so the length of your CV is very much about how much you've got to say, keeping in mind that it's got to be interesting. In my opinion, the optimum length of a CV should be about 2 pages. I think if you're going over onto 3 pages, it needs to be really interesting. Anything longer than 3 pages, I don't think you've really made your point in a kind of succinct fashion, and you need to reduce it down. And so just think about that when you're producing a CV. How long should my CV be? So is there a set way that a CV should look? Well, quite honestly, no, there's not. Again, it's your CV, but there are some fundamentals here about the kind of the format of the CV that have become quite normal, and I think hiring managers would expect to see a CV kind of following some of those norms. So there's 2 big rules, I think, and the 2 big rules that I think are important when you're writing your CV is, first of all, to consider the presentation. This is a sales document, okay? So it's a sales document because it's selling you. It's promoting you to a prospective employer, and you want to impress that prospective employer. So it needs to be clear, it needs to be concise, and most importantly, it needs to be easy to read. If you're on the receiving end of CVs, I'm on the receiving end of CVs as a recruiter, a hiring manager in an airline, an HR director, an HR manager, a pilot recruiter, they're on the receiving end of possibly hundreds of CVs every day, possibly hundreds of CVs, and people are people, clearly, and so we have an attention span, and when we read CVs, if a CV is easy to read and quickly kind of engages my interest in reading that CV, I will look at it, read it, and I'll spend time on it. If all I see is a sea of words and there's no formatting, there's no paragraphs, there's no spaces, there's no thought gone into that CV, possibly it won't even get read at all. So something that's very specific to pilots and very specific to you pilots out there today is how you present your hours and your licenses. It's really important that you put thought into getting this kind of essential but basic information into a format that is super easy to read. I see too many CVs from pilots where the way they've set out their hours, it's just complicated. You're making it really, really difficult for the person who receives your CV to read and understand your hours. A good test is to set your hours out on that CV and set your licenses out, and then ask someone to read it and just ask them, is this easy to understand? Does this make sense? Can you look at it and in 30 seconds get your head around it and it makes sense? Because if it doesn't, then your CV is not working. I think the second really important big rule here about CVs is that you have to get your spelling and your grammar correct in your CV. It is not acceptable in today's world of spell checkers and these programs like Grammarly. You know, there are free versions of Grammarly available on the internet. You all have spell checkers built into your laptops, your PCs, your devices, and there are no excuses for spelling mistakes and grammatical errors in your CV. The message that a spelling mistake sends out to a prospective hiring manager is, quite honestly, that you have poor attention to detail. So really important that you get that right. One of the other questions that I get asked a lot is, should I use a CV template? They say, Mark, you know, there's a lot of templates available online. Should I use one of these templates that's available online to write my CV? My answer to that is quite simple. If you feel that you need help in producing your CV, then by all means, yes, use a template, but be careful. The reason you need to be careful is because a lot of other people out there might well be using the same template to produce their CV also. And if you want your CV to stand out from the crowd, then it's really important that you get that right and that you kind of adapt the template and the content to bring it to life. Otherwise, it's just going to look the same as everyone else's. So some of these things I'm talking about now, you know, I'm talking about grammar and spelling, your contact details, getting those right and accurate at the top. Having a short personal statement at the beginning of the CV to bring your CV to life, to tell people a little bit about yourself. A mistake that a lot of people make with a personal statement is it's just too long and it's windy and wordy and waffly, and it shouldn't be. It should be impactful, it should be short and to the point, and it should bring your kind of application, bring your CV to life. We've talked about the importance of license hours and qualifications, getting your experience down in a way that's easy for people to read. One of the other basics that we see quite a lot that pilots get wrong is they set their CVs out in the wrong order. So what do I mean by that? Well, your CV should be in reverse chronological order. So your most recent experience should be first on your CV. Likewise, you should spend more of your time or more of your CV writing about your most recent experience. It's really, really interesting to a prospective employer what you did 20 years ago, but actually it's even more interesting, more relevant, and more important what you did last year or what you've been doing up to date, and that's really what matters. You need to sell in your CV what you have achieved. Think about your achievements in your career to date. Think about things that you've done in your most recent job and previous jobs, and what achievements you've got. What have you got to sell? What have you achieved and what have you done? And try and sell that in your CV. My personal pet hate for CVs is the CVs that you see that have a big paragraph of just buzzwords at the top of the CV. I don't see any need for it. I don't see any place for it. It doesn't really serve any purpose. And you'll see that some CV templates encourage you to do that. I encourage you to ignore it and instead to write a nice personal statement. And then finally, on the subject of CVs, the question I also get asked is, Mark, with my LinkedIn profile, do I still need a CV? Well, yes, you do. You need a really good CV, and you also need a really good LinkedIn profile. So let's move to have a little look at some of the stuff around kind of thoughts and considerations around social media. So first of all, is your social media profile the reason you aren't getting interviews? And I think that's an interesting thought in today's world. We'll have all read various things over the last couple of years about people who've had crazy stuff on their LinkedIn profiles and who have had job offers withdrawn and who haven't been interviewed, and these things have come up in the press. But it's worth thinking about, excuse me, it's worth thinking about, and let's have a little look at some of these points. So your social media profile is just as important as your CV. Why? Because really most employers and most recruiters, they're going to take a look at your LinkedIn profile at the very least. They might look at your Facebook if it's available to them, or anything else that you've posted on social media. In some situations, organizations will pay background checking agencies to do social media background checks on candidates. Now, I haven't seen that so much for pilots, but it's becoming increasingly common in other careers and recruitment that we do in other sectors. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that come in for pilots as well. So what do we need to be thinking about? Well, the first thing to be thinking about is your profile picture that you use, especially on something like LinkedIn. So that picture of you with your mates in the pub with a pint of beer in your hand, well, what a lovely picture that is, and I'm sure you had happy memories of that night at the pub, but it might not be the profile picture, for example, that you would want to use if you were applying for a job with an airline in the Middle East. That picture of you holding a beer, that could be the difference between getting an interview or not getting an interview. It's an example. Think about your privacy settings, and so think about what you're using your profile for and accessibility of your profile. Who do you want to see your profile and for what purpose? Is this a profile that you're using as a job seeker, or is the profile that you're using purely for social purposes, and therefore you adjust your settings accordingly? Career history. Well, what do I mean by career history? Well, any recruiter worth their salt is going to have a look at your career history on your LinkedIn. And I'm afraid all too often, the career history and the dates and the years of employment and the jobs that you've had, they don't always match the CV that you've submitted in your application. And so in its simplest sense, as a recruiter, if I see that someone's career history on their LinkedIn profile is different to their career history on their CV, that's going to set off a big alarm bell for me. So there's two thoughts, and it's brutal, but there's two thoughts. First is, you're not telling the truth. I know that might not be the case, but the thought goes through my mind. If there's something on your LinkedIn profile that doesn't match your CV, maybe you're not telling the truth. Second thought that goes through my mind is perhaps your attention to detail is not very good. And you just don't know. You don't know your dates. You don't know your own career history. These are both negatives. They're not positive. So make sure they match up. And then finally, be professional. Think about kind of LinkedIn as being your shop window, if you like, and it's your shop window for you and your personal brand as a pilot to the world. And the same is true of Twitter and Facebook. And think about what people will read into you as a candidate and how they might view how professional you are when they look at your social media. So let's have a little look at video interviews. So we've seen a big increase in airlines using video interviews. Now, there's two types of video interview. You have static video interviews where you'll have a set of questions that are presented to you at the beginning of the interview. Excuse me. And you have to talk to camera and answer maybe half a dozen questions. Maybe a couple of those questions are about you and your career to date. Maybe a couple of those questions are situational or scenario questions, and maybe a couple of those questions are technical questions where they ask you to walk through some technical aspect of your job role. Okay, so that's the first type of video interview. There's various software packages out there. A very common one that companies are using has a very unfortunate and not a very nice name. It's called the Needle. And so the Needle is one of these big static video tools that increasingly companies are using. Hopefully, you won't have to do one of these static videos, and hopefully it'll be the second type, which is a video interview using Zoom or using Teams or one of these bits of software where it's a two-way video like Skype and that sort of thing. And really, I'm just going to walk you through some of the key points of video interview that I think are really important. put this into context, I'm running a CEO search right now for an airline in the US, and I've been coaching my candidates, my senior executives, through exactly what I'm coaching you through today for how to perform on a video interview. The same applies whether you're a pilot, whether you're a CEO, whatever, the same rules apply. So first of all, body language, facial expressions, okay? I think something gets lost on video, okay? I think that you have to be slightly larger than life in a good way, slightly larger than life when you do a video interview. I think that you need to try harder with your body language, you need to try harder with your facial expressions, you need to talk with a smile when you're talking to people, and you need to make eye contact, okay? So you really got to try hard to look at the camera that's in front of you, and you've got to really try hard to make eye contact. So you've got to talk to camera. There's a reason why newsreaders are more expressive than they normally would be when they're reading the news. If you look at newsreaders, if you look at television presenters, when they're talking to camera, they are trying harder with their voice and with their hands than they normally would, because they're trying to bring their personality through. They're trying to be more expressive on the video interview itself. The danger, if you don't put effort into this, is you will come across as flat. And you don't want to come across as flat on video, okay? You want to come across as your real personality. And so you've got to put a little bit more into a video interview than you normally would. So think about your voice, think about your hands, think about your head. So for example, if you are listening and you want to show that you are actively listening in the interview to the other person talking, you can't keep interrupting to say, yes, yes. You've got to nod. Yeah. Got to nod. You've got to nod your head to show agreement, to show that you're listening to what the other person's saying. If you agree with them, you've got to nod your head. If you don't agree, you've got to shake your head. You've got to use your body language more than you normally would. Okay, so we're all using Zoom. Many of us are still in lockdown. Some of us are still at home. And it's fair to say there is a thing which we call Zoom fatigue. You know, the Zoom fatigue kicks in with interviews as well. It's really important that you think about this Zoom fatigue when you're on interview, and part of that is about thinking of your backdrop behind you, okay? And so I've come into my office today, and I've done that because the internet's better than it is where I live in the sticks at home, and I've dropped the blind behind me to provide a really plain backdrop, because otherwise all of you guys out there are getting a bit bored with the sound of my Hampshire accent. You're going to be looking at the pictures or looking at the ships that are parked outside my office in Southampton in the Solent, and you're going to be looking at that. And the same is true if you do Zoom with someone and you're doing an interview and they've got a bookcase behind them. After a while, you start to lose interest and you're starting to read what books they've got on their bookcase. So a plain backdrop is best. Okay, you want the focus of the video to be you and nothing else, okay? So on the subject of distractions, close everything else. Close down all of your other email or the other programs that you've got running on your PC or on your laptop, and get everything closed down so that you haven't got any pop-ups or any other distractions that are coming up. So close everything else, including the door. Close your door to wherever you're going to be doing this as well. Avoid interruptions as much as possible. Additionally, video interview, you need to treat it as if you're meeting the person face to face, which means that you've got to dress appropriately, okay? Which means that you've got to be suited and booted. All right, you've got to be dressed appropriately for that interview, because if you're not, people will judge you accordingly if you're not dressed in the right way for interview. So be suited and booted. So there's some just hints and tips to think about of how to conduct yourself on a video interview. Okay, but don't forget, just because you put the effort into the video interview itself and you're nodding and putting effort into your body language, if you fall down on some of the interview basics, in addition to that, it's not going to work. So you've got to really prepare and run an interview as a candidate as if you were going to face-to-face. So research, you need to take time and do your homework. okay? Which means you need to know about the organisation that you're applying to. You need to be able to answer questions that might be fired at you by the interviewer about the organisation. So you need to do your homework, and that's essential. Don't get let down by failing to do the basics well. Really important at the beginning of the interview that you do take time to build rapport. A little bit of small talk at the beginning of the interview will go a long way. Build rapport, show some warmth, show some empathy, particularly in these tough times at the beginning of the interview. It's really important that, again, you bring yourself to life as a candidate. Before the interview, prepare some questions. And really, you want some different types of questions. So you want some what I call credibility building questions. These are questions that kind of build your credibility as a candidate. They show that you have done your research and that you've done your homework, and they show the breadth of your knowledge. Like I said at the beginning of the interview, I'm not a pilot. So, to use a made-up example, you might, for example, build a question that says to a client, I see that you're flying a particular type of aircraft, and I understand that, and what I've experienced is there's been some problems with that aircraft, and we've had some updates, and these have been the things that we've done. What have you done in your airline to overcome these problems? The point being here is that your questions should demonstrate the breadth of your knowledge and help to build your credibility. The questions that you should stay away from in an interview are what I'd call basic HR questions. On an interview is not the time to be asking about kind of hours or benefits and these basic HR things. Deal with that afterwards. Focus your questions on building your credibility and demonstrating your knowledge, and really kind of build yourself up as a candidate. Finally, when you finish the interview, it's really important when you shut down that video screen, the same as if you were to walk out of an interview room, that you finish on a positive note and that you ask for the job. Mr. Client, I like what I've heard today. I'm really interested in this opportunity. I would love to progress this. I'm very enthusiastic about joining your airline. Let's talk some more. Come back to me. I'm keen to move this forward. Leave the interviewer in no uncertain terms at the end of the interview that you're positive and that you want this job. Likewise, after the interview, take the time to follow up with a nice email just to say, thanks for the interview. I've enjoyed my time with you today. So very quickly, 10 survival tips to think about managing your career in a crisis. So first of all, be active but selective, okay? So get yourself out there, apply for jobs, but apply for jobs that you're qualified to do and that are right for you. So be selective. You will damage your credibility if you apply for positions that you're patently not qualified or suitable to do. Number two, remember, it never rains forever. Incredibly tough time right now. It will get better. My personal opinion, this isn't going to last too long. It will get better quite quickly, and be optimistic and upbeat about the future. Number three, be on your A game. The A game starts with your CV, it goes through the interview, and it's kind of onboarding, it's all the way through. Be on your A game with everything that you're doing here when you're applying for jobs. Number four, think about your transferable skills. Think about what you're good at, think about what you enjoy, and think about how you can apply those to the jobs that you apply for. Number five, flexibility is key. So a job might not be your ideal, but it might be something to keep you going. And so be flexible when you're thinking about what you're applying for. So that really moves into this kind of safe port in a storm. You really probably want something right now that's going to tide you over during this difficult period and keeps you in the game. As you come out the other side, you can get your career back on track, but you really want something that's going to tide you over during this period. Be visible, but don't be a stalker. So be enthusiastic, chase up the CVs that you send out, be keen, but don't become a stalker. You know, in terms of the airlines that you're talking to and the recruiters that you're working with, be visible, but kind of, don't overdo it. Think about LinkedIn. We talked about the importance of your profile. It is your shop window. Put some effort into getting it right and how you want it. Consider contract work. I know Sam's in a minute going to talk about some contract opportunities and talk about how that works, but be flexible, think about contract opportunities. And then finally, use this as an opportunity to invest in yourself. Think about what skills and knowledge you can invest in yourself and move your career forward. So my contact details, I'm on LinkedIn. You can easily find me, connect with me, talk to me, ask me questions. I'm good with all of that. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to pass straight over to Samantha. And Samantha really is heading up our Goose team here. She's operationally leading this business day to day. So she's very much in the thick of what's going on right now. And I know she's going to walk you through some great opportunities that we've got. I hope that you have found my career tips and advice useful today, and do ask questions, but I'm going to pass you straight over to Samantha. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mark. I'm just attempting to get my presentation up when it decides to join us. Here we are. Good morning again, and thank you for joining us today. That was great, Mark. As Mark mentioned, I'm going to discuss some current live pilot opportunities with some of our clients, in particular ASL Belgium. A little bit about ASL Belgium. They operate globally, providing chartered, scheduled and ACMI services to its expansive portfolio of clients. Their client base spans worldwide with a focus on Europe, China, the United States and the Middle East, working with clients such as FedEx and UPS. The business previously operated under the name of TNT Airways until it was acquired by ASL Aviation Holdings in 2016 and rebranded to ASL Belgium, which it may be more familiar as. For the opportunities in hand, we're working as a recruitment leasing partner for ASL. ASL are unable to hire you on a direct contract, hence why ASL have appointed GOOSE Recruitment in order to comply with the union agreements in Belgium. You will be based in Liège, Belgium, and we have opportunities for first officers, cruise release captains and captains. And these are all on a 1-year renewable contract with also the option of a commuting contract. To begin, I'm going to discuss the requirements for the first officer opportunities with a monthly salary of €6,800, and this is subject to Belgian tax. The requirements for this position are as follows. We're looking for a minimum hours of 2,500 and a minimum hours on type of 750. You must hold a valid EASA ATPL with Boeing 747-400 type rating along with a Class 1 medical. We also require an English proficiency level ICAO 4 and upwards, and the last proficiency test for pilot within the term, proof of no aviation accidents and incidents, proof of no criminal records by country or nationality or country of residence, and you must hold an EU passport. I will now move on to the Boeing 747-400 cruise relief captain requirements with a monthly salary of €7,800 per month, subject to Belgian tax. Please note, on a case-by-case basis, there's the opportunity to upgrade if onboarding as a senior first officer. So ASL will evaluate your experience once you've joined and potentially discuss this in more detail, but it's something to be mindful of. The requirements for this position are as follows. 2,500 hours required, along with a minimum hours of pilot in command 500 and a minimum hours on type of a 750. Again, you must hold a valid EASA ATPL with Boeing 747-400 type rating along with a Class 1 medical. And similar requirements here, English proficiency level ICAO 4 and upwards, last proficiency test for the pilot within its term, proof of no aviation accidents and incidents, proof of no criminal records by country or nationality or country of residence, and again, you must hold an EU passport. Lastly, we're going to talk about the Boeing 747-400 captain's requirements with a monthly salary of $9,200, and this again is subject to Belgian tax. The requirements we're looking for here on the captains are as follows: 4,500 minimum hours, along with a minimum hours pilot in command of 1,500 and a minimum hours on type of 1,500. You must hold a valid EASA ATPL with Boeing 747-400 type rating, along with a Class 1 medical. And again, as previously, an English proficiency ICAO level 4 and upwards, last proficiency test for flight within its term, proof of no aviation accidents and incidents, and proof of no criminal records by country or nationality or country of residence, along with an EU passport. So I'm going to discuss the benefits package now. It's similar for all three positions, so I'm going to do a summary of the all three positions benefits. So flight pay of €50 will be provided between 6 to 10 hours, and then anything further over the 10th hour within a 24-hour period, €95. An average block hour of 70. This will not affect your basic pay, and this will be based on a gross figure, which will be subject to Belgian tax. A bonus is provided upon completion of contract, and it will be 9 to 10% of your annual salary, and that will come through as vacation pay. You'll also receive 4-star accommodation and breakfast, which will be provided away from base. You'll also receive a minimum of 10 days off per month, or divided over 2 to 3 periods. Jump seats are available for flights to home residents through the ASL network, with bases in Belfast, East Midlands and Stansted. 2.5 days annual leave per month acquired, and this is set by law in Belgium and equates to 30 days annual leave. Again, this is all for a 1-year renewable contract. I'm now going to walk you through the recruitment and hiring process with GOOSE and ASL to provide you with some insight to what you may experience when you begin your application. So, the first stage, we would request that you register your interest and send your CV to jobs@gooserecruitment.com, or alternatively, you can visit our website shown here to register and apply for any of these positions and any other positions. You will then be contacted by one of our pilot talent specialists to discuss in more detail about the opportunity. You'll then be contacted and the initial call will be an in-depth conversation where we'll walk you through your CV and experience. During this call, we'll be able to provide you with some opportunity to ask any questions you may have for us or regarding ASL Belgium. Stage 2, one of our account managers will call you for a further discussion. This will not be as in-depth as the initial call, but at this stage, we'll also request your documentation for submittal. Please note, we will not submit your application at any stage unless it has been agreed by both parties. If successful, this will then be followed by a HR interview carried out by telephone with ASL Belgium. You will then be invited to a psychological test in the Netherlands. Again, if successful, you'll be invited to a simulator assessment. Please note, the simulator assessment is subject to experience and on a case-by-case basis. Therefore, you may find that you actually skip this stage, but again, it's dependent on experience. So if there's an OCC date that's coming very soon and you've passed both stages with a great background, then you may skip the simulator assessment. So as I say, it's on a case-by-case basis. And also, just following on from that, please also be aware, we completely understand the current situation within the industry and within the world, and we provide full transparency throughout the process. Therefore, if there's any changes with your current employer and we are notified promptly, we are happy to withdraw your application, okay, so that you could go back if required. Now, at this point, you may be asking yourself, why GOOSE? So I'm going to highlight a few reasons as to why. As mentioned, you will have a dedicated pilot talent specialist and account managers to contact throughout the process, receiving regular updates by telephone and additionally debriefs carried out with your account manager after each stage of the process. We'll also assist and support throughout interviews and assessments. from booking interview slots to arranging necessary paperwork for travel, especially in this current climate. At Goose, we have record-breaking time for filling interview slots with ASL and providing prompt contact to candidates with this information. So as soon as the interview slots come in, we'll contact our candidates straight away to get them booked in, so they take those slots straight away and we can get you moving through the process. But most importantly, we really do want to help you successfully achieve these roles. Therefore, we'll provide you with as much information as support throughout this process. And just a little reminder there, that's our website and the email. If you'd like to take note or a screenshot, please do contact us. And a bit of Mark's slide there. There's a few of the clients that we work with that we're accepting expressions of interest currently. Of course, in this current environment, some of the recruitment has gone on hold and we're hoping it to resume soon. But of course, we do already work with these clients. So if you would like to express your interest, please do. And register on our website. Live jobs are popping up daily. So if you're registered, you will get notification and hot jobs, etc. So please do that. And we're here for any questions to help as well. But thank you. I'm going to hand over to Wendy now for myself and Mark to answer some of your questions.
Can't hear you, Wendy.
Hi, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Samantha, for those presentations. To those that are watching, the webinar will be available on the BALPA website in the careers area. So if there's any particular parts you want to reference and go back to, you'll be able to do that. So we've got just over 10 minutes to ask some questions, if we may, Samantha and Mark. I'm going to go back to the your presentation, Mark, and got some questions from the members about the CV, and particularly about social media. Some really good points that have been made. The first question is from a first officer, so quite newly qualified. He's wondering, does he need to explain what his job is as a first officer, or is just having the title enough for the HR department that are going to be reading the CV?
I think that's a really good question. I think the answer to that question depends on what you're applying for. So if, for example, you were applying for a job, God forbid, outside of aviation, then I think it would be a really good idea to explain more in your profile, and especially in your CV, more about the role of a first officer, the responsibilities, maybe even if you're applying for a job outside of aviation, how you get to be a first officer in the first place, and the training path that you'll follow to get your qualifications, to get your license. And I think that it really comes down to what you're applying for. If you're applying for jobs with airlines and you're applying for a job as a pilot, there is no need.
Okay, thanks. Mark, there's a really good question that's come up a couple of times about social media. How do employees view it if you haven't got social media accounts? So you don't have perhaps a Facebook, Instagram or LinkedIn profile. Does that have any bearing on how you might be received by the HR departments?
No, I don't think so at all. No, I think there's absolutely no necessity to have any form of social media. But I think if you do have social media, you need to think about how you're kind of representing yourself, how that shop window, as I talked about, looks to the outside world. But if you don't have social media, not a problem.
Okay, just question slightly related to that. Something we get asked a lot, and it's come up today during the webinar, is what's your views on including a photo on your CV? Because it tends to be more prominent on LinkedIn profiles. It tends to be standard that you have a photo there. But what about the actual CV you're submitting?
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. So some companies, for example, will not accept a CV with a photograph on it, which is perhaps not widely known, but some companies will not accept it because they're worried about, I guess, probably discrimination and someone being able to sort of turn around and say you discriminated against me. But of course, the reality here is that a picture brings your CV to life, a photo brings your CV to life. If your company is not prepared to accept a CV with a photograph on, they will say so in their application process. And if it was via a recruiter like us, we would tell you that, or we would just remove your photograph prior to making the submittal. And so, personal opinion, I would encourage you to have a photograph, as long as the photograph is a good photograph and it's professional.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Something else that I just wanted to check with you, and it has come up on the webinar. In other sectors, in other industries, employers can use automatic reading software of CVs. You're aware of that. You're nodding quite a lot. In terms of our pilots applying for aviation jobs, are there any tips that they could use to ensure their CV gets through that filter, i.e. that barrier of that piece of equipment that's filtering those CVs? Is there particular words or phrases that would help them kind of slip through to the selection part of that?
Very good question. It's called parsing software, and a lot of companies do use parsing software. And this software is reading your CV, looking for keywords. It's intelligent software, so it's looking for phrases and keywords, and it uses that to pass the software through to a next stage. Now, it's interesting, in many sectors and many businesses, parsing software is very common. In my experience in the airline space, and Sam, I don't know if you would add anything different to this, I don't think we see a lot of companies using it in the airline space. The danger that you have as a candidate is that you end up making your CV what I call keyword rich to be able to get your CV through the parsing software. So you end up writing a CV for software to read, so it's full of lovely keywords and phrases that you think will get it through the software, but actually when a human reads your CV, it doesn't work and it doesn't make any sense. And so I think still write a good CV, make it nice and clear, follow the basics that I set out, and I think that most parsing software will pick it up just fine. Sam, would you add anything on parsing software?
No, it's not something I experience, or when talking to clients and we're talking about their recruitment process, it's certainly not something that I pick up on, that it's something they're utilising.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to turn to the jobs market now, if I may. Could you share some examples with us today, and thank you so much for that. But our members are asking, have you seen any trends in particular regions? So where are the recruitment hotspots? Is it Middle East, Europe, etc.? What's your kind of feeling on that at the moment?
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say that we're seeing more activity in Asia than we are yet in Europe. And some of the Asian airlines who we have relationships with and who we've recruited for in the past, who have gone on to hold, and they've put recruitment on hold, they're starting, and I don't wish to kind of jump the gun here, they're starting to show some signs of optimism and starting to show some activity that they may start to look at pilot recruitment again. But there's no floodgates opening here. Sam, what would you add to that?
No, I was just going to say, well, following on from that, of course, it is a little bleak right now, but I've also had a call with a client this morning, an airline, and they've got a huge project up and coming. I know it's not what we're seeing much of at the moment, but certainly is in their area. So there are things happening, and there are plans moving forward that we're going to start seeing soon, which is great to see some light at the end of the tunnel.
What region are they in, Sam?
Europe.
Okay.
Yes. Again, so it was quite nice to hear.
Good. It's hot off the press.
Yeah.
That's good. A question that kind of we need to think about and be honest with our answer. Since the COVID crisis, for the sectors you're recruiting into, have you seen an erosion of the terms and conditions that are being offered to pilots?
Not yet.
No.
No, and that's not yet.
Okay.
Will it come? Maybe. I think it depends it really depends on the shape of this crisis. And when you talk to airlines, certainly around the world, airlines seem to have a different view. Some seem to think this will be a V-shaped crisis, kind of steep in, steep out. Other airlines that we talk to think it will be a U-shaped crisis, and then it depends on the shape of the U. You know, how flat is the bit at the bottom. I think that if we find that it is more V-shaped and we're kind of deep in and fast out. I think that compensation and benefits will hold up okay, but I think that if it's U-shaped and the U is kind of wider than we would hope, you might see some erosion of terms and conditions.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll just come on to one last question because I'm conscious of the time. Members have asked questions a lot about type rating and conversion, and also the situation with Brexit and licensing. So what I'll do, I'll take those offline, and I'll work that into a newsletter so we ensure that we're answering your questions, members. Okay, so no one won't be go unanswered, is what I'm trying to say. So I'd just like to finish, actually, Samantha, just a bit of clarity on your presentation, and it has come up actually in the past a few times. When we say you're going to apply for a 12-month contract, company, do the 12 months start when you finish the kind of introductory training with that airline? Or does it start day one of that training? I suppose our members are looking, what's their employment line looking like?
Mark, I'm not actually sure in this particular case with ASL.
From the beginning. It's from the beginning. Yeah, it's from the point of starting. So from the contract will start rolling from the point at which they turn up and start work.
Okay,
and
great.
could I make reference as well, Wendy, following on from that? The start dates with ASL, I did notice one of the questions, they are happening now. So there's not a delay. They have a set amount of dates every month. So we have slots. We have people starting Monday. We have people starting in 3 weeks. So, but of course, it's to your situation. So if you're unavailable to start in a week's time, you could go on to the next OCC date a month later.
Okay.
Coming back to contracts, I think it's an important point to make. This is a fixed 12-month contract, so it's not a contract for 12 months that you might work 6 and then finish. This is a fixed 12-month contract, which for pilots who are looking for something, this safe port in a storm, and if you've got the type rating and you meet the criteria, to have a job now for the next 12 months, and perhaps, fingers crossed everybody, but the storm will pass a little bit, and coming out of it, you can either then look for a new opportunity or potentially, if the opportunity is there, re-sign with ASL. ASL are a great company, and it could be that people actually want to stick with this.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Mark and Samantha, for being guest speakers on the BALPA webinar this morning. Thank you to the members that have been watching. I hope you've been able to get some gems from this. And please look out in your BALPA newsletters for more webinars that we're going to be rolling out over the coming weeks and months. Take care, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you.